6, 2013 marks the 50th
Korea celebrated its Memorial Day on June 6 by remembering those who sacrificed their lives to protect the country. Anchor Choi Yoo-sun, along with Defense Ministry correspondent Han Da-eun, came together to bring live coverage of the 58th Memorial Day ceremony. Around 10,000 men of national merit and family members of the deceased gathered at the Seoul National Cemetery to attend the Memorial Day ceremony, and Arirang TV delivered live coverage of the event.
Only 6 months since Abenomics kicked in December last year.
On June 5th, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe announced the third part of his Abenomics policy plan in a bid to revamp the country's economy. Reporter Song Ji-sun had covered Japan's upcoming economic measures ahead of the announcement. For her News in-Depth report, she looked closely at scenarios and countermeasures related to the potential success or failure of the Abenomics policy.
Currently, around 64% of Koreans.
On June 4th, the government announced a roadmap to achieve a 70% employment rate through collaboration with 13 government bodies, including the Ministry of Employment and Labor. The issue attracted a lot of attention given that the goal for a 70% employment rate was one of President Park Geun-hye's campaign pledges. The government measures include plans for creating part-time employment, eliminating labor inequalities, and boosting economic participation of women and senior citizens. Economics correspondent Kim Yeon-ji wrapped up the whole story.
김한울, 아리랑 뉴스.
Well, this Tuesday marks the 100th day since President Park Geun-hye took office, and we now take an in-depth look at how she has done during that rough 3-month period.
Right, so what was people's verdict on President Park Geun-hye's accomplishments so far?
Well, Jay, a lot of polls have recently come out on President Park Geun-hye's approval ratings for her first 100 days. Now, if you look at this chart,
the first 100 days since President Park's inauguration have been quite a busy period for reporters covering the presidential office.
국민 앞에 엄숙히 선서합니다.
Government appointments saw some delays even a month after Park's inauguration amid key amendments being made to the National Government Organization Act. Making things worse, North Korea continued with provocations by scrapping the ceasefire agreement. Then, another serious incident occurred with a presidential staff member.
국민 여러분께 큰 실망을 끼쳐드린 데 대해 송구스럽게 생각합니다.
Afterwards, the president returned from her first state visit overseas.
And that trust will propel us to expand the horizons of our cooperation.
The past 100 days was a period for President Park to set up the structure of her government. Now, this meaning carrying out government restructuring and making nominations and appointments for her high-ranking officials, and also sharing her governing philosophy and policy goals with her cabinet members and senior presidential secretaries. Now, in that sense, the past 3 months or so was a very important period for President Park Geun-hye, although it would have been for other previous administrations as well. So that's the main reason why I did this special story on her 100th day, and to let the people know what she did until now and what she is planning to do for the next 5 years or so.
Our presidential office correspondent Oh Jin-ju has more.
Our presidential office correspondent Oh Jin-ju has the details.
President Park promised to set up a transparent and
Jin-ju is a senior reporter with nearly a year-and-a-half experience reporting from the presidential office of Cheong Wa Dae. And she's been tasked to report on the 100 days since the presidential inauguration from a fresh and different perspective compared to other media outlets.
returning home on Friday. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News, Washington.
여기다.
As for her first interviewee, reporter Jin-ju decided to visit a professor with expertise on North Korea. But she's faced with the problem as she's unable to get in touch with the professor.
저 김용현 교수님 되시나요? 저 아리랑 TV 어진주 기자인데요. 예, 오늘 그 2시에 인터뷰하기로 한 것 때문에 저희가 연구실 앞에 와 있는데, 네. 예, 알겠습니다. 기다리겠습니다. 네.
여기가 해제되었습니다.
감사합니다.
Jin-ju refuses to quit as she wants to interview a North Korean expert for her story.
안녕하세요. 아닙니다.
회의가 있어요.
네. 저 명함 하나 드릴게요. 아리랑 TV 어진주입니다.
네. 제가 뵙지는 못한 것
네, 처음이에요.
네.
네.
반갑습니다.
네. 그럼 이제 박근혜 정부 내일로 취임 100일째가 되는데 그동안에 뭐 개성공단 폐쇄 위기도 있었고 북한의 끊임없는 도발도 있었는데 그 100일을 어떻게 평가하시는지요? 그 대북 정책.
이 강대강의 대결 구도를 해소하지 못하고 여전히 남관계가 살얼음판을 걷고 있고 남관계가 상당히 어려운 국면으로 가고 있는 이것은 일정 정도 박근혜 정부에게도 책임이 있다고 봅니다.
그럼 어떤 부분이 더 보완되어야 된다고 생각하시나요?
박근혜 정부의 대북 정책에서 남관계 관리 능력, 한반도 위기 관리 능력을 정부가 좀 더 중장기적인 차원에서 보여줄 필요가 있다. 대화라고 하는 전반적인 신뢰 프로세스를 전면에 내세우면서 전술적으로 압박도 가하는 그런 정책적인 것들이 필요하다. 특히 남관계를 풀어가는 데 있어서 임기 5년 전체를 보고 남관계를 풀어가는 그런 지혜가 필요하고 그 과정에서
First of all, the biggest issue for South Koreans has always been and will always be North Korea, as any unexpected event involving North Korea will have a direct effect on the lives and safety of South Koreans. And the South Koreans are always interested in a new government's North Korea policy, whether it's a rather firm stance or a rather softer stance. So I wanted to give a wrap-up of what President Park is planning to do with North Korea and how she's planning to deal with North Korea. So that's the reason I wanted to take an in-depth look into President Park's North Korea policy. And that was the reason why I interviewed a professor of North Korean studies, especially in my story.
On the date marking the president's 100 days in office, media outlets have put out stories relating to the current administration's many problems with government appointees and the lack of communication within.
네, 교수님, 아리랑 TV 어진주입니다. 예, 지금 도착했는데 올라가도 될까요? 네, 알겠습니다.
So Jin-ju decides to meet with an expert who will give his advice about the issues surrounding the current administration.
네, 뭐 일반적으로 보통 사람들이 되게 보는 거하고 비슷한데요. 박근혜 정부의 문제는 사실은 출발이 매우 늦었다는 것이 문제입니다. 한 40여일 이상을 인사 조직 문제 가지고 그야말로 옥신각신하면서 사실상 아무것도 하지 못하는 창조 경제라든가 뭐 일자리 창출 문제라든가 이런 것들에 대해서 좀 구체적인 담론이 아직까지 나오질 않았습니다. 아직은 확신을 갖지 못하는 이런 상황이 아닌가 이렇게 생각합니다.
그럼 교수님께서는 그 인사검증 시스템에 대한 비판이 굉장히 많았었는데 뭐 윤창중 사건까지 터지고 이런 마당에 어떤 부분들을 보완해야 한다고 보시나요?
언론에서 보도되는 모습을 보면 장관들의 목소리가 거의 들리질 않습니다. 결국은 장관이나 이런 인선에 큰 문제가 있다는 얘기죠. 국가 인재 DB가 있어요. 키워드를 중심으로 이렇게 집어넣는 거예요. 전문가들을 뽑죠. 그래서 거기서 추려 나가는 겁니다.
I did agree to a lot of part of what the experts said about the Park administration, where she needs improvement. And probably President Park lost the most points for her failed nominations and appointments, especially starting from her nomination for Prime Minister Kim Yeon-ji to the former presidential spokesperson Yoon Chang-jung. A total of 14 people either nominated or appointed as high-ranking officials have resigned or were sacked because of numerous scandals surrounding them. So I do agree to the experts' comments about President Park's failed nominations and appointments, and I do wish that she will set a more stricter standard or process in selecting her high-ranking officials from now.
Jin-ju has returned from an interview. A few hours remain until she goes on air, but she continues to write her story until the last minute with tremendous focus.
자기들이 그냥 청와대 취재를 해서 했다고 해서 내가 일정에 올인한다고 그걸 가지고 자기네가 기사를 만들었더라. 그래서
라이브로는 무빙 안 되죠.
그러니까 뭐 하려면 할 수는 있는데
네, 좀 그렇죠.
타이밍이 좀 있어요? 그게 뭐
그러면 그냥 통으로 해주실래요?
이게 몇 번째 들어가는 거예요?
제일 첫 번째 인덱스 1번. 네네, 통으로 그냥 라이브로 갈게요.
네.
감사해요. 네? 네.
Shinju brings us new items that are only possible because of her role as the presidential office correspondent, and so she makes sure everything is set up visually and logically.
I started my story with a recent poll showing her approval ratings and compared it with the same poll taken back in March to give an overall picture of how the public think about President Park's past 3 months. And then I went on to what the people think President Park did well, which was her North Korea policy. But I did include an expert soundbite on what she can improve in her North Korea policy, although people say that she did well on that. And then I also touched upon the improvements she can make and in what fields she lost the most points, which include, as I said, her system of selecting high-ranking officials and her economic pledges such as the so-called creative economy and job creation. Especially for creative economy, many people don't know are not familiar about the definition about the creative economy and how it can really help their daily lives. So I thought that that would need more explanation from the government. So I included that in my part where there needs improvement in President Park's policies.
It's been a while since Shinju has appeared on an in-depth segment, but she is focused and ready to go. This time, she is reporting on the president's first 100 days since her inauguration.
Basically, it's going to start off with talking about some of the opinion poll figures. So the whole focus is going to be like public opinion.
And experts' opinion.
Right. Okay.
the things she did well and the things that need improvement. I just divided into that.
Right.
Chin-ju is envied for her post as the presidential office correspondent, but she carries a lot of responsibility covering the latest presidential news while she continues to pave through a busy schedule every day.
How can this performance so far?
Well, a lot of polls have recently come out on approval ratings of President Park's first 100 days. Now, if you look at this chart, a survey conducted by Media Research, 47% of the Korean people replied that President Park is doing well in dealing with North Korea. Her series of failed nominations and appointments were met by strong criticism in the country. Experts also cite her lack of communication with the opposition as another weakness of the Park administration.
Doing a story on the president's first 100 days in office gave Chin-ju the opportunity to cover key government issues. It also provided her time to personally look back on her experience as the presidential office correspondent.
It was a time for me to look back on what President Park did over the past 3 months, and it was also a time to look back on what I did over the past 3 months. I remember the time when I used to be at the transition committee to cover stories of then President-elect Park Geun-hye, and where all the news of her new nominations and new policies were announced. And back then, nothing seemed to be settled, and I was kind of afraid to go through all the hectic stuff that might happen over the first few months. But looking back, although I was sometimes very stressed about the load of news coming out from the presidential office, and because I was the only one there to figure out the importance of every news item, and through the process, I got to get used to the new government system and the new people at the Blue House. So it was a very meaningful 3 months for me. And as she has always emphasized, I wish Korea could become a more happy society where people can live in.
That's right. Scott, thank you so much for coming. Glad to see you. Right. Thank you so much for taking time to moderate my session.
Thank you for
so
coming.
much.
Yeah.
Right.
Congratulations, by the way, as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good job. Yeah.
Well, I've not had an opportunity to meet with you.
Sure.
That's what others do as well.
Sure. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. You had a chance, I guess, to look over the questions.
We'll also have a conversation and talk a little bit as well about certain things. But yeah, we'll pretty much stick to what's on the script there as well.
Well, I like the way the questions.
All right, that's good.
Right. Feel free to raise those questions.
Great.
Glad to listen.
All right. I will take you up on that offer. I think.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, absolutely. When,
so long as we keep away from Mr. Yoo.
No worries. Yeah, don't worry about that. No worries at all.
Right.
When do you fly off to Washington?
Well, maybe sometime early in June.
Early June.
Yeah, sometime early in June. Okay. Because my predecessor, Ambassador Choi, he in fact had to prepare for the visit of President Park.
Sure.
So because of it, he did not have sufficient time to prepare for his own departure.
Right.
So he needs some time.
Right.
And then I think there is a tradition according to which ambassadors, they do not overlap.
Sure.
So after the predecessor leaves, they need to be only after some time. That period of time is called as interregnum.
Interregnum?
Regnum, right.
Okay.
Regnum means reign of the king. Inter means in between.
Sure.
In the sense that ambassadors, they are representatives of kings,
right.
sovereigns.
Yeah.
So for that reason, at this period of time between, say, departure of the preceding ambassador and then arrival of the next ambassador.
Interregnum.
Interregnum. Right.
And it's going to get busier probably.
그러죠. 예. if not before, I will meet with you in Washington.
The first Korea-U.S. summit of the Park and Hye administration.
Park and Hye administration was held in Washington in May, opening up a new era of bilateral relations between the two longtime allies. Thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you, Scott, for having me with you.
Do you have any behind-the-scenes stories of
How personal and warm President Obama was. President Obama said, well, talking about sign, my daughters, they use smartphone coming from Korea, and then they taught me about how to dance this. I do not know how
Gangnam
call it.
Style.
Gangnam Style.
Right. Some would say, though, that there should have been a more concrete solution to the North Korea crisis.
There are certain principles which have been laid out by President Park and then President Obama, which is we can never condone nuclear North Korea.
What is Korea's role in doing that, in building that structure up?
You name it. There are so many different areas where Korea and then the United States can continue to cooperate, deepen their cooperation. We already have FTA with almost.
Ambassador, we are very glad that you came on the show today and took time out of your busy schedule to talk with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, and then let's keep in touch.
Thanks so much. Yes.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah. I'll be looking forward to seeing you in Washington.
Sure.
Keep an eye out.